Right now, there are things on your body that you could live without: a watch, a ring, earrings, a favorite t shirt, even your hairstyle. You switched it up this morning. None of these things help you design faster. They don't make you stronger. They protect you from the cold better than regular clothing, but you wear them anyway. Now imagine a person 100,000 years ago. They didn't know what a state was. I can't read. They've never seen a single city. Every day they risked death from starvation, infection, or a predatory pandemic. And so this person, who literally had no time for unnecessary actions, sits down on the seashore, picks up a shell, carefully drills a hole in it, and hangs it around their neck. Why? Why does one exist? What fights for survival? What spends energy on beauty? And the strangest thing is that it is this useless shell that can change history, which exists more powerfully than a spear, fire, or stone axe. To understand the answer, we have to travel very far back in time. In 2004, archaeologists were working in Blombos Cave on the southern coast of modern-day South Africa. The excavation was led by archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood from the University of Bergen and the University of the Witwatersrand. The find turned out to be unexpected. Scientists discovered more than 40 small seashells of the species Nassarius kraussianus. At first glance, there was nothing special about them. But then, researchers noticed the details. Each shell had a neat hole. The edges of the holes were polished, and traces of friction remained on the surface. When archaeologists studied them under a microscope, the picture became clear. The shells had rubbed against each other on a single thread for a long time. They were worn as a necklace. The age of the find was approximately 75,000 years. These are among the oldest ornaments known to science. The most interesting part was not the shells themselves, but the fact that they were useless. You can't make a knife out of them. You can't cook a meal with them. You can't build a shelter from them. It turns out that ancient humans deliberately spent energy for the sake of a symbol. This is exactly where the real mystery begins. The human brain is an incredibly expensive organ. Today, it consumes about 20% of the body's total energy, even though it makes up only a small fraction of body mass. The situation was similar for our ancestors. Evolution does not like useless expenses. If a behavior persists for millennia, it means it provides a serious advantage. But what advantage can a bead provide? For a long time, scientists believed that ornaments originated as religious objects. However, data gradually began to accumulate, pointing to a different explanation. Humans did not decorate themselves for the gods. They decorated themselves for other people. Here, it is important to understand one peculiar trait of our species. Most animals evaluate each other very quickly: strength, size, age, scent. But human societies were gradually becoming too complex. 50,000 years ago, people were already living in groups, exchanging resources, forming alliances, and cooperating with strangers. A new problem arose. How do you understand who is in front of you? Friend? Enemy? An experienced hunter? A reliable ally? A member of your own group? This was exactly when ornaments began to function as social signals. They became an ancient version of an online profile, except instead of a photo, people used beads, paint, and patterns. In 2018, a group of researchers led by Marian van Haren analyzed dozens of archaeological sites in Europe and Africa. They discovered an interesting pattern. The larger human communities became, the more symbolic objects appeared. Ornaments literally grew alongside the complexity of society. This makes sense. When you know every person individually, extra signals are hardly necessary. But when there are hundreds of strangers around, a need arises to quickly convey information about yourself. An ornament becomes a language without words. However, the story gets even more interesting. Some beads were made from shells found dozens of kilometers away from where the people lived. This means they were intentionally transported over long distances. In fact, ancient humans were not just hunting for food. And this is where psychology enters the game. In the 19th century, Charles Darwin proposed the idea of sexual selection. He noticed that many animal traits look completely irrational. A peacock's tail makes the bird more visible to predators. The huge antlers of certain deer require a colossal expenditure of energy, but these traits help attract partners. Therefore, they persist. Many anthropologists believe that human ornaments worked partly on the same principle. A beautiful necklace conveyed important information to others. I have free time. I have resources. I know how to create complex things. I am connected to other people. I am worthy of attention. In essence, a bead became an advertisement for its owner. But there is another level, and it is much deeper. In 2009, researchers from several European universities conducted a series of experiments on the perception of symbols and group belonging. Participants showed images of people from different sides using markers. Even minimal differences instantly affected the level of trust. The brain automatically divided those around into us and them, and this happened in a fraction of a second. Ancient ornaments could have performed exactly this function. They showed belonging to a specific community community. Imagine a world without passports, documents, or last names. A world where a mistake in choosing an ally could end in death. In such a world, a bead became a tool for survival. But why then didn't people limit themselves to simple signs? Why did ornaments become increasingly complex? The answer lies in the peculiarities of the human brain. We are unique in our ability to exist inside fictional stories. Money works only because millions of people believe in its value. States exist because people agree to consider them real. Brands matter only because we endow them with meaning. Ornaments became one of the first such symbols. They possessed no physical value, but they possessed social value, and social value often turns out to be more important than material value. Gradually, humans began to decorate more than just their bodies. Drawings appeared on walls, patterns on tools, special ways of treating clothing, tattoos, pigments, masks. Each new symbol expanded the boundaries of the human world. Archaeologists found another amazing thing in Blombos: pieces of ochre with geometric patterns dating back about 75,000 years. The lines were drawn intentionally. They depicted nothing. No animals, no humans, no maps of the area. It was an abstract sign, one of the first pieces of evidence that humans had begun to think in symbols. This is exactly where the line is drawn between us and most other animals. We do not just live among objects, we live among meanings. A stone can be just a stone, or it can be a crown. Fabric can be just fabric, or it can be a flag. A shell can be debris on the shore, or it can be a status symbol. It was the ability to create meaning that changed human history. But the most astonishing thing is something else. Adornments didn't just change how people looked. They changed how people began to think about each other. Before the advent of symbols, people were judged by what they were doing right now, how strong they were, how fast they ran. Can they forage for food? But with the advent of adornments, a new ability emerged. People began to judge not only by their actions, but also by their appearance. A single glance became enough to guess who was standing before you. Friend or foe, experienced hunter or novice, a person of high status or an ordinary member of the group. Our brain still does this. We notice clothes before we hear a voice. We notice a watch before we notice a character. We notice a person's appearance before we even recognize the person themselves. It's an amazing thing. Jewelry was once a way to quickly convey information. Over time, it began to shape first impressions. And first impressions often prove stronger than reality. And this is where a story begins, the consequences of which humanity still feels today. But here, an unexpected twist awaits us. What once helped us survive has gradually turned into a trap. Ancient humans used ornaments as a way to show their place in a group. Modern humans are surrounded by such signals every second. Logos, brands, statuses, followers, likes, ratings. We are still sending messages to those around us about who we are. Only now, the scale has become gigantic. Algorithms study our preferences. Companies sell identity along with goods. Social networks have turned self-demonstration into an endless process. And a strange paradox arises. The more ways a person has to show their uniqueness, the more dependent they become on the validation of others. Once, a bead helped find an ally. Today, millions of people wake up and their very first action is to check the audience's reaction. Our brain has remained almost the exact same as that of Stone Age hunters, but the environment around us has changed beyond recognition. We are still looking for recognition. We still want to belong to a group. We are still afraid of being rejected. It's just that instead of a shell necklace, other symbols have appeared. That is why the history of ancient ornaments turns out to be much closer to us than it seems. In reality, it is a story about us. Every time a person chooses clothes, a profile picture, or way of speaking, they are answering a very ancient question: who am I among other people? And perhaps the most interesting point is that there is still no definitive answer, because ornaments were never just ornaments. They were an attempt to tell the world about oneself, and at the same time, an attempt to convince oneself. Maybe that is why 100,000 years later, we continue to do the same thing. We still hang symbols around ourselves. We still build an image. We still hope that someone will see this signal and understand us correctly. But if one day you remove all the logos, all the ornaments, all the photos, all the status symbols, and all the masks, a question will remain. One that has accompanied humans since the appearance of the very first bead. Who are you when you no longer wear a single symbol? And perhaps the entire history of civilization is just a long journey from the first shell on a string to the search for the answer to this question. Because the heaviest ornaments a person wears are not on the body, but inside their own head.